Hello. Welcome to chapter 11 and 12 of Fuzzy Mud. Let's get started. Chapter 11 looks like this. Once again, it is one of those documents that says confidential, and we've got more and more and more of these dots up in the corner. It's titled Poof. Excerpted from the Senate's secret hearings. Senator Haltings. Of course, we all have great hope for a non-polluting, inexpensive alternative to gasoline. But my big concern, Mr. Fitzman, is what will happen when your man-made organisms mix with the natural environment. How will they affect plant and animal life, and ultimately human life? We just don't know. Jonathan Fitzman. I've got that covered. Senator Haltings. The smaller something is, the harder it is to keep it contained. You can put a tiger or a grizzly bear inside of a cage, but it's a lot harder to keep a tiny microorganism from escaping. Jonathan Fitzman. Not a problem. Senator Haltings. If you have your way, people will be filling their cars with Biolean at every gas station from Miami to Seattle. Tanker trucks will be hauling Biolean across the country. Drops will spill. Accidents will happen. Then what? Jonathan Fitzman. Look, you got it all upside down and backwards. You're all worried about ergonomics getting out, but really, it's just the opposite. I'm doing all I can to keep the outside from getting in. Senator Haltings. I'm not sure I see a difference. Jonathan Fitzman. Ergonomics can't survive in oxygen. Expose an ergie to oxygen and poof. Poof. It disintegrates. Poof. You don't have to worry about ergies escaping into the air. At Sunray Farm, we had to build special vacuum-sealed hoses and tanks just to keep the air out. Chapter 12. Wednesday, November 3rd, 7:08 a.m. Tamaya awoke to her favorite song. Cold air came through her window, purposely left open just a crack, making the warmth of the covers much cozier. Her music came on at 7:08 every morning, because 8 was her favorite number. And Monica's favorite number was 7. Her best friend, Monica, also woke up each day at that exact time. Tamaya's thoughts drifted back to last year. There was a huge fireplace in the back of her 4th grade classroom. Her teacher had filled it with pillows, and when the students finished their work, they were allowed to go into the fireplace and read. That's so cool. The fireplace was so big, there was room in there for at least 4 kids. And she and Monica were usually the first 2 back there, side by side, reading their books, trying not to giggle. As Tamaya was thinking about this, a growing sense of dread slowly crept into her memories. The image of the pillowed fireplace gave way to the woods, her torn sweater, and Chad, his cold eyes staring at her. He said, "You're next, Tamaya." Her hand tingled. She brought it out from under the covers to have a look. At first, she thought the rash had cleared, but as her eyes adjusted to the light, she realized the red bumps were still there, covered in some kind of powdery crust. There was powder on her pillow, too, and when she pulled back the sheets, she could see it all over her bed. It was a pinkish bronze color, the same color as her skin. She leapt out of bed and hurried to the bathroom. The powder washed right off, but the rash had spread. Red bumps coated her entire hand and continued down to her wrist. Some of the bumps had turned into blisters. Looking at herself in the mirror, she could see a crusty area on the right side of her face. She splashed it with water and then scrubbed the entire area very hard with a soapy washcloth and very hot water. There didn't appear to be any bumps on her face. It looked a little red, but that could have been from her scrubbing so hard. Her mother's jar of Miracle hand cream was in Tamaya's bathroom. The night before, she had dabbed a little bit on each bump and then gently rubbed it in. Now she went whole hog. She dug her fingers deep into the chalky ointment, pulled out a big glob of the stuff, and smeared it thickly over the entire area. She returned to her bedroom, where she bundled up her sheets. Then she took them to the washing machine. She set the temperature gauge to hot. "You're washing your sheets now?" Tamaya spun around. Her mother was already dressed, wearing a cranberry-colored skirt and a jacket. Her eyeshadow was the same color as her clothes. "Because of my rash," Tamaya said, "so it doesn't spread." "Let me see." Tamaya held out her hand. "It looks a little better, I think," her mother said. Tamaya knew that was because it was covered up by the hand cream, but she didn't say anything. Her mother's breath smelled like toothpaste and coffee. "Tell you what," her mother said. "You tell Marshall I'll be picking you up right after school today. I can give him a ride home, too, if he wants, but then I'm taking you to see Dr. Sanchez." Tamaya nodded. She was glad that her rash would get treated. 2 times 64 equals 128. 2 times 128 equals 256. She put on her backpack, positioning the straps so they covered the hole in her sweater. Then she walked quickly through the house and on out the door before her mother could get too good a look at her. She still didn't know how she would explain the hole she got in her sweater. She reached Marshall's house just as he was coming outside. He was wearing his old glasses. He had switched from glasses to contacts over the summer. She liked his glasses better. She had thought his face looked blank without them. "You're wearing your glasses," she said. He shrugged. "I lost my contacts in the woods." "Oh." In her mind, she could see Chad slugging him in the face, his contacts flying out of his eyes, although she realized it might not have happened that way at all. She could see no bruises on his face. He just looked tired and washed out, like he hadn't slept for 6 days. He dragged his feet as he walked. On other days, Tamaya had to struggle just to keep up with him. But as they continued slowly up the sidewalk, she began to worry that they might be late. Her tingling sensation on the hand had become more of a prickling. It felt as if her hand were being stabbed by 1,000 very tiny needles. "Oh, my mom's picking me up after school," she told Marshall. "She's taking me to the doctor because I got a rash or something in the woods." She showed him her hand, but he hardly glanced at it. "You didn't tell her we went in there, did you?" Marshall asked. "No. Because if you did, we'd both be in big—" "I said I didn't tell her." "Good. She can give you a ride home, too, if you want." "Yeah, whatever," Marshall said. She knew he was glad for the ride, glad to be safe from Chad. They turned onto Richmond Road. There was a lot of early morning traffic, and once again, Tamaya realized how much safer Marshall would have been if they had just walked home the usual way. She wouldn't have torn her sweater, he wouldn't have lost his contacts, and she probably wouldn't have gotten the rash either, she thought, although she wasn't really sure how she'd gotten that. As they walked alongside the woods, that feeling of dread she'd had when she first woken up returned. It seemed to grow a little heavier and heavier with each step they took. She couldn't pinpoint exactly what it was she was dreading. She didn't think that she was all that afraid of Chad, as long as other people were around. It was something different, something worse. It was as if she knew something terrible was about to happen, but it was so bad her brain wouldn't even let her think about it. They reached Woodridge Lane. "This is where I was supposed to meet him," said Marshall. There was an area of weeds and dirt between the sidewalk and the fence. Tamaya figured that Chad must have climbed the fence and gone into the woods when Marshall didn't show up. At least there would have been people around, Tamaya pointed out. "It was worse in the woods, Marshall." "Don't remind me." And he kicked the ground. Tamaya felt sorry for him. She didn't like the feeling that way. She liked it better when she used to look up to Marshall. Chad's just a big jerk, she said. I don't care about him, Marshall muttered. A big fat jerk, she repeated, loud enough so that if Chad was hiding nearby, he would definitely hear her. They turned onto Woodridge Lane. The woods were on both sides of them as they headed toward the school. Tamaya quickened her pace. We'd better hurry so we're not late, she said, but Marshall continued to lag behind. She walked faster and faster, and then something inside of her made her want to run. It wasn't just the fear of being tardy. She felt scared, although of what, she didn't know. She was out of breath when she reached the line of cars backed up from the school. Only then did she stop running. She heard someone call her name. Marilee, Monica's little sister, was hanging halfway out the window of her mother's Mercedes, waving at her. Tamaya waved back, using her left hand. She tried to keep her right one hidden. She waited by the curb as Marilee, and then Monica, climbed out of the car. Where were you yesterday? Monica asked. I kept trying to call. Tamaya wanted to tell Monica everything, but didn't dare risk it. She knew Monica would tell Hope, and then it would be all over the school. I don't know, she said, in and out. You need to get a cell phone, Monica told her. They're not allowed at school, Tamaya reminded her. You can use it after school, said Monica. I was in and out too, said Marilee, and then I went in again, and then I went back out. Monica told her sister to shut up. So, you'll never believe who I saw yesterday, Monica said. Mr. Beauchamp? Said Marilee. Shut up, I'm telling her. Mr. Beauchamp. He was jogging right in front of my house. He sees me and says, Bonjour, Mademoiselle Monique. I swear I almost lost it, Tamaya. Mr. Beauchamp had been their French teacher since 2nd grade. You wouldn't think a bald guy would have such hairy legs, said Monica. Tamaya forced herself to smile and act like they were just having a normal conversation. Marshall was relieved to see Tamaya safely enter the building with her friend Monica, and there was no sign of Chad. He really wasn't sure what he would have done if Chad had attacked her. He liked to think that he would have tried to protect her, but he also knew he might not have. He reached the front door. The 7th grade was located in the basement. It had been the servants' quarters, but everyone at the school called it the dungeon. It felt like a dungeon to Marshall. He trudged on down the stairs, doomed to whatever torture and misery awaited him. That's the end of chapter 12.